This girl is as strange and mysterious as a riddle. Every morning she disassembles and reassembles her 9-linked ring regularly, and she must record the time of each operation. She is not exactly afraid of society, but if she doesn't hide in the world of headphones, she can't leave the house. Starting a conversation with her is extremely difficult because she always unconsciously uses strange words to push others away. Even when making a phone call, she has to write a script and prepare for all possible responses. But when she actually makes the call, she stammers and can't say a word. Only when she puts on her headphones can she regain her composure. She even has a bit of obsessive-compulsive disorder, not only arranging things neatly, but also always putting them back in their original place. She doesn't have a single friend, so she can only live day by day under the care of her retired father. Since childhood, she didn't like to talk, but was particularly interested in the cases that her father had not solved. She even developed an almost psychological obsession with police work, but the doctor diagnosed her with early childhood schizophrenia. Like a child forever immersed in a starry sky. Her name is Patience. After growing up, she became a record archivist at the police department. Because there she doesn't have to communicate much, and there aren't even any colleagues working with her. But she still maintains such a disciplined lifestyle that she turns her life into a monotonous and boring series of days. Until one day, she received a request to extract a file. But when she brought the file to the place, she met a female detective who was busy texting. She didn't know how to start the conversation, so she tried to joke a little. "Do you know you're wearing mismatched socks? My shirt and underwear don't match either." Unexpectedly, communication is really scary. Patience immediately ran away from the scene as if she was escaping. The female detective also felt that Patience seemed to have given her the wrong file. This female detective's name is B. At this time, she suddenly realized that the girl in the archive was not simple. So B ran to the window to ask, but was mistaken for wanting to complain. They told her to send an email to complain to her superiors. Reluctantly, she sneaked in when no one was paying attention. This is the first time they met, but soon they will become the best crime-solving duo. When B asked why she gave her the wrong case file, Patience replied that she never made mistakes because the two cases were extremely similar. The victims were all psychiatrists, and coincidentally, the time of death fell on the 4th Friday of the month. It turned out that this morning a strange thing happened. An old man frantically pushed his way to the bank counter and said he wanted to withdraw £8,000 immediately. Then he went outside in a daze and threw all the money into the trash. After doing those things, he went to the parking lot, took the gas can from the trunk, poured it directly on himself, and lit it. Just like that, the man inexplicably set himself on fire. But no matter how strange it is, the evidence clearly shows that this is a suicide, so there is no need to investigate further. But the victim is a friend of the police chief, so to deal with their superiors, they can't ignore any details. The responsibility of solving the case fell to B, but the surveillance camera can completely prove that the victim set himself on fire. Moreover, there are no witnesses. They can only analyze the 90-second video carefully. Then B went to see the victim's relatives. She was surprised to learn that the man showed no signs of abnormality before committing suicide. He was even an optimistic and cheerful psychologist. The only thing that was difficult to understand was why he insisted on withdrawing £8,000 from the bank. So B remembered a similar suicide that happened many years ago. 3 hours before cutting her wrists in the bathroom, the victim also withdrew £6,000 in cash from her account. Moreover, her child had just been born less than a day ago. The person should not have intended to commit suicide. At this moment, when she requested the file, she discovered that Patience had brought another suicide case along. This is definitely not a coincidence because the profession, the amount of cash, and even the date of death are the same. And the bank manager's testimony is even more noteworthy. The victim seemed to have been affected by something. No one knows that the turning point in solving the case is thanks to Patience. Because her father knew she was often complained about at work, he suggested she provide positive evidence to lead the way. So the next day, she met Detective B in front of the police station. She believes that the victim may have been affected by anesthesia, which B accidentally overlooked. But in the crowded elevator, she started to panic. Before she could close the door, she hurriedly jumped out. When she slowly walked into the office, she explained that the victim's dilated pupils could be a sign of poisoning. And there are several other cases in the National Police Database that have similar records. Patients noticed an organic compound called scopolamine. It can cause the victim to lose control of their behavior, which is the magic water that makes people obedient. It can even cause amnesia and mental disorders. Because the half-life of this substance is only 9 hours, the toxicology report may not be able to detect it. But if inhaled through the nose or mouth, traces can be found in the respiratory tract. The forensic doctor was stunned. This strange girl actually dared to talk nonsense in front of an expert. Fortunately, the body was not burned too severely, so after re-examination, they found 17 micrograms in the respiratory tract. So the task force immediately opened a discussion, but unexpectedly the tense atmosphere made Patience, who was listening, sink into memories. Perhaps she will never be able to live independently in this life, or become a useful member of society in the way people say. At this time, Patience was pulled back to reality by BEA's call. She yearned to become a useful person to society. It's just a pity that when it comes to important moments, she gets so nervous that she stutters. Then she hurriedly runs out of the meeting room. After work, B also had the opportunity to walk her a short distance. But she found that she didn't go home, but went to a support group for people with autism. At this time, B vaguely realized that her son seemed to have symptoms similar to Patience. That night, she finally took the time to be with her son. Unexpectedly, she discovered that her son had a special talent for mathematics. Unfortunately, like Patience, the boy would rather talk to animals than communicate with people. The next day, she immediately investigated the 2 suicides that year. She discovered that one of the 2 victims, although living nearby, had booked a room at this hotel 12 times in the year before committing suicide. When she returned to the bathroom where the suicide occurred, B discovered an unfinished cigar. Did no one notice at that time? She immediately asked her colleagues to check this matter carefully. Immediately after, she heard from the hotel cleaning staff that the victim's stay time was almost always around 3 p.m. After meeting the wife of the remaining victim, B accidentally learned a shocking secret. It turned out that the victim had to be treated for sex addiction. So was the other person's hotel booking history related to this? The missing cash also proves that before committing suicide, the victim had a transaction related to this issue. But BEA's colleagues suddenly interrupted her reasoning. Because Patience had just been arrested, the police discovered through surveillance footage that only 36 hours after the victim set himself on fire, Patience had sneaked into the scene of the crime. Moreover, when investigating the cigar, her colleagues unexpectedly discovered that the victim was the psychologist who diagnosed B with schizophrenia as a child. This is a motive for the crime. Every day Patience goes out, she must carry 2 umbrellas in case one breaks. She can use the other one. The most difficult thing is when she meets acquaintances and greets them. She immediately gets confused and doesn't know what to do. So she will pretend not to see and hurriedly walk away. Only when she sits in a place where she can lean against a pillar does she feel safe. It was this strange Patience that the police considered a suspect in the case. Every time she is in a confined space, she panics and has to constantly wring her hands. When interrogated by the police, she gets so nervous that she can't utter a word. Perhaps only those who have experienced it can understand that. No matter how many words they want to explain, they can't open their mouths. Seeing this, the police chief had no choice but to leave. Understanding the situation, Detective B hurriedly ran to the office to explain. But at that moment, a familiar face suddenly rushed into the police station. This person is not only a retired former police officer, but also the godfather of the girl who is always silent in the interrogation room. Everyone now realizes that Patience is a patient with autism. When the door opened again, everyone's probing eyes changed. Because only B had contacted her, she carefully approached and asked. It turned out that Patience was sinking into her childhood memories. She had been like this since she was a child. Every time the psychologist asked a question, she never answered. Just reading the names of the books silently can avoid answering the question. It was BEA's gentleness at this moment that made her open her heart. Finally, she said the reason. It turned out that she came to the scene of the suicide to find the suspicious cigar. Because through the photo in the file, she had seen the cigar at the psychologist's clinic. She asserted that these 3 suicides were definitely related. But even though she had searched the entire car, she still couldn't find any trace of the cigar. Hearing this, B immediately led people to the parking lot. But before that, the police had also searched the victim's car very carefully. They didn't understand why B was urged to check the car's exhaust pipe. And it was true that she found half a cigar there. After further investigation, they discovered the suspect through the surveillance camera of another building. Moreover, they also found the victim's envelope containing money, and it was taken by a person in black. The police chief immediately formed a task force and asked B what else she needed support with. She suggested that Patience join the team as a civilian investigation assistant. Although the police chief agreed, B still needed Patience's father's permission. The background of this autistic girl gradually came to light. It turned out that her godfather and biological father were colleagues at the police department. After her biological father passed away, her godfather became her guardian. Since childhood, Patience had been monitored by a psychologist for autism. Her biological father did not agree to put his daughter in the hospital for treatment because he believed that she was not ill, she was just a different child. Before the age of 12, Patience almost never spoke. until they brought an unsolved case home. She opened her mouth. From that moment on, Patience's autism gradually improved. Unfortunately, her mother passed away early, and soon after her father also died in a mission. As for whether to persuade her to join the task force, her godfather could only let things happen naturally. So B began to persuade her. She solemnly invited this file manager to join her team. But Patience was afraid of any change, because she couldn't face the unpredictable. Unexpectedly, the situation quickly progressed. The president of the Autism Support Association, after hearing this story, immediately offered a feasible solution. Because many people with autism have their own special interests, which is their safe zone. He likes to collect membership cards, and Patience likes to solve puzzles. If she encounters an unsolved problem, she can forget to eat and sleep to find the answer. Hearing these words, B immediately changed her tactics. First, she expressed her gratitude for Patience's help. Immediately after, she raised questions about the case. How could the culprit harm people for this little money? And what special meaning do those cigars contain? After saying these words, B hurriedly drove away. Unexpectedly, these questions were like the only missing piece of the puzzle. It immediately aroused Patience's curiosity. So she immediately returned to the file room. First, she seriously fed the mice in a disciplined manner. Then she devoted all her mind to analyzing the case. When BEA's team investigated the origin of the cigars from Belize, unexpectedly, she immediately received a message from Patience, because she had identified a clear direction of investigation. She pulled out the drawer. A meticulously arranged clue board immediately appeared before everyone's eyes. Then she explained that yeast is a natural source of scopolamine, which includes Belize in the Latin American and South American region. So she remembered that on the psychologist's bookshelf there was a Belize travel guide. But when she was little, she didn't see this book. This proves that the doctor likely went there before committing suicide. Next, she found a photo taken at the airport waiting room in 2016 on the second victim's social media. Therefore, it proves that both of them had been to Belize. Although it still cannot directly prove that the third victim was also involved, but she discovered an immunization record from a few years ago, proving that the victim was a CPS expert and had been to Belize for work. Soon after, the two quickly ran to the company where the victim used to work to investigate. Marketing director Cooper greeted them. The opponent admitted that he had represented the company to attend a marketing event abroad in 2016, but he didn't remember who went with him at that time. As for the list, it is necessary to wait for the company's legal department to confirm before it can be provided. But Patience immediately realized that Cooper's name was not his real name. The opponent also frankly admitted that for the convenience of doing business, he used another name. But this is personal information, so B cannot arbitrarily question without an investigation warrant. Seeing the clue right in front of her eyes that could help solve the case, that night Patience fell into a state of restlessness and couldn't eat or drink. Seeing her uneasy appearance, the president of the support association decided to break the rules to help. Unexpectedly, the next morning there was progress. B finally investigated Cooper's original Spanish name. Moreover, he also had a previous conviction related to women trafficking. But unexpectedly, this type of transaction is legal in Belize. So if there is a pervert among these 4 psychology doctors, who knows what crazy things they have done there? At this moment, Patience and the president of the support association also brought shocking news. It turned out that the president's hacker girlfriend had hacked into the company's server. Not only did she find the list of personnel who had been abroad, but she also found important evidence in Cooper's email. There was a boat rental certificate from a shipping company, along with an insurance contract including him and the 3 deceased victims. But unfortunately, the company's server has hacker warning software, so if they don't act immediately, the suspect named Cooper may escape. As expected, they guessed correctly. At this time, Cooper had finished packing his luggage and collected all the cash. At this time, the sound of knocking on the door rang in his ears. It turned out that the cleaning staff had scheduled to come to clean. But it was from then on that things became more complicated. When B arrived, she saw Cooper standing dazed on the roof of the building. Unexpectedly, when a policeman ran up, the opponent jumped down in a state of unconsciousness. So the suspect committed suicide to escape punishment, but the lock was still intact, so the culprit and the suspect knew each other. The safe was open and half of the strange cigar was left inside. Patience also saw the wrapping paper on the floor. This was the place where the culprit blew the anesthetic powder into the suspect's face. Then she discovered an abnormality on the cabinet, because to remove fingerprints, the culprit wiped one side of the dust. Although the suspect still had a pulse, this was inconsistent with the rule of killing on Friday. Fortunately, in the forensic examination, a remaining fingerprint was found. It matched a cleaning staff named Maya. Hearing this name, Patience suddenly remembered that Maya was the cleaning staff of the railway hotel. Because after the first victim committed suicide in the bathtub, the police took the fingerprints of all the hotel staff for storage. Bea also suddenly remembered that when they investigated there, they saw this person leaving in a panic. Unfortunately, when they returned to the hotel, they learned that Maya had resigned. Now there is only the landlord's emergency phone number left. Unexpectedly, when called, the opponent's voice mailbox plays in Spanish. But fortunately, Patience understood. Based on the content of the voice message, they quickly found a cafe. After hearing that the police were looking for an illegal immigrant tenant, the landlord immediately said that the person had returned home last night. Bea immediately realized the abnormality. Having just committed a crime today, how could he leave the area last night? She quickly rushed to the attic with the male police officer. Unexpectedly, a shadow appeared from behind. The two immediately chased, and that person was the cleaning staff Maya. The male police officer immediately subdued her on the dining table. Finally, the culprit was brought before the law. Bea, through a video call with the embassy of the other country, learned that Maya came to England in 2016, coinciding with the month that the three victims went abroad. She also had a 17-year-old sister who applied for a UK study visa in that year, but did not record any immigration records. It seems that everything needs to be interrogated further. During the search, they found next to the altar in the closet full of cigars. In addition, there was a matchbox stained with blood. The landlord also came to apologize for lying. She didn't expect this fellow countryman to be a wanted criminal, and that closet was actually an altar to the fire god in the Santeria religion. Legend has it about revenge on those you hate, especially those who create karma with women. Cigars are sacrifices, and Friday is the most sacred day in the sect. Finally, the culprit admitted everything and revealed a tragic story about her sister seeking revenge for her younger sister. It turned out that Maya found the blood-stained matchbox on the yacht and believed that the evil British doctors had murdered her sister. Because her sister was a prisoner who was lured by Cooper with $500 and then pulled onto the yacht, Maya's sister, wanting money to study abroad, ignored the warnings and boarded the boat. She anxiously waited at the pier, but eventually only saw 4 doctors return. So Maya decided to impersonate her sister and go to England to find the 4 murderers to avenge. And the matchbox was the only clue. She finally waited for her enemies at the hotel by the boat. At this point, the case was clear. Patience had become an important member of BEA's team. On her first day as an investigation assistant at the police station, she didn't even dare to step over the crime scene cordon. But as soon as she saw the body, she knew the victim had died from drowning. Because her fingers were purple, her eyelids were swollen, and there was white foam around her nostrils. The forensic doctor standing next to her was also stunned, but the clothes and the floor were clearly dry. Patience didn't explain anything because she was sure she couldn't be wrong. The victim was a 28-year-old museum researcher in charge of managing paleontology fossils. It was strange that the cleaning staff discovered the body at 7 a.m., but the director didn't report it to the police until 8:30 a.m. Bea didn't care, but Patience's guess surprised everyone. Immediately after, Patience found in the system that 4 years ago the victim was accused of smuggling fossils. Because the Mongolian customs found dinosaur teeth in her bag, her ex-boyfriend volunteered to take the blame, and as a result, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison. In addition, the museum director, who is very academic, only had a speeding ticket. At this time, the autopsy report also had results. The victim died of pulmonary edema due to drowning. It seems that Patience was right. Water testing can determine the location of death. At this time, Patience discovered a strange tattoo on the victim's left arm, not knowing what it meant, but the mystery must lie in it. Immediately, they searched the victim's residence and found a valuable fossil sample. On the way back, Bea stopped by to bring lunch to her son, but unexpectedly Patience brought the fossil sample. More surprisingly, the boy immediately recognized that it was the hip bone of a dinosaur. They brought the fossil to the museum director and learned that it could be auctioned for tens of thousands of pounds. After that, she discovered that there was a surveillance camera installed in front of the museum. The video showed that on Sunday night the victim returned to the museum at 11 p.m. in a state of intoxication. About 10 minutes later, her ex-boyfriend appeared at the door. Because he had a previous conviction for trading fossils, the police chief immediately agreed to summon him to cooperate with the investigation. Because Bea was busy with the interrogation, she had to ask Patience to help pick up her son after school. Unsurprisingly, 2 people with similar personalities quickly became close friends. But the interrogation was not smooth. The victim's ex-boyfriend was extremely saddened to learn that she had died. Because last night he received a call from her, he thought she wanted to get back together with him. But when he went to the museum and knocked on the door, he didn't see her answer. The strangest thing was that last night he received a call from a strange number. The other person spoke stutteringly, as if drunk. Unfortunately, because he was too angry, he deleted that phone number immediately. The interrogation yielded nothing, so Bea had to go home to take care of her child. The museum director gave the boy a toy, but there were no instructions, causing him to throw a tantrum. Fortunately, Patience is very good at assembling models. She stayed up all night looking up documents to complete it. But unexpectedly, she discovered something unexpected from the book pages. Isn't this the tattoo on the victim's arm? The next morning, they compared the tattoo, discovering that the tree branches of the Tree of Life had a new branch added. They immediately went to the museum director. It turned out that the additional line represented a newly discovered evolutionary branch. But the director was busy publishing his thesis, so he refused to reveal the research content. Patience immediately returned to the archive room to review all the victims' academic reports. Finally, she found a clue, from which she deduced the real cause of death. Bea also asked the forensic doctor to clarify. It turned out that at some point before she died, the victim's lungs were flooded with water, making it difficult for oxygen to enter the blood. A few hours later, she would gradually become weak, as if drunk, until she looked like she was drowning. Such cases have only had 4 cases in 30 years. Water tests in the lungs helped determine the location of death, and they discovered a place called Massel Quarry. Here the victim met a delivery driver. From these clues, Patience continued to analyze. The next morning, she identified the real culprit. It was not the driver or the ex-boyfriend, but the museum director. Because at Massel Quarry the victim fell into the water but did not die. At 8:27 p.m., she borrowed the driver's phone to call her ex-boyfriend. And at 8:14 p.m., the surveillance camera a kilometer away recorded the director speeding. These two events happened too close together, definitely not a coincidence. So the police immediately issued an arrest warrant for the director. The interrogation took place, and the truth was gradually revealed. Bea investigated in the academic journal and discovered that the director had changed the article he was about to publish. The main reason was the dinosaur fossil that the victim brought home to photograph. Because when he read her research report, he suddenly realized that his article was completely worthless. Fortunately, the phone and notebook that were thrown into the water were recovered. The data inside confirms this guess. It turned out that the article the director was about to publish was completely the same as the victim's discovery. He killed people to steal the achievements of others. Finally, he confessed. It turned out that after 2 years of managing and directing the fossil research project, the victim was the one who achieved the results first, so he secretly submitted her thesis under his name. He was even invited by the magazine to be the cover person. He rushed to the quarry to negotiate the copyright, but the victim refused to compromise and scolded him for stealing her scientific discovery. Faced with the insults of a woman, feeling humiliated, he angrily threw her notebook into the water. Unexpectedly, the victim immediately raised her phone to film and threatened to post it on social media, so the two had a scuffle. As a result, the victim accidentally fell into the lake and in just a moment sank. He panicked and hurriedly drove away, which was why he sped. Finally, the case closed. The director was convicted of manslaughter and imprisoned. Then the introverted girl finally let go of her guard and accepted a hug from her best friend.